Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter 8. In this week's lecture, we are going to learn about creating a moving average, projecting income and expenses, and determining a break-even point. Chapter 8 is pretty long, and so what I decided to do was break it into two weeks. So this week we're just going to be concentrating on Section 8A. Next week we will complete Section 8B. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to start by going into MyLab and Mastering. We're going to go ahead and open MyLab and Mastering. From the course materials list, scroll down to locate the folder for Excel 8A. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll on down. We'll open up the folder for Excel 8A. And the activity that we're going to be working on is the homework 8A Excel 8E inventory, seafood inventory. That's the activity that we're working on. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and download our materials. Make sure you have the instructions. This is going to be our start file. I'll go ahead and download everything. Make sure you extract your files. Make sure you know where you've extracted your files. The file that we need to get started is the student file, so I'm going to go ahead and double click on that to open the file, which opens the application. And as always, I always like to go in and first save the file by doing a save as, giving it a new name so I don't overwrite the original file. All right, and I'm going to put that back in my downloads folder. Okay, so this is what we're starting with. We have Brina's Bistro, and these are for the Dallas restaurant. Now in this particular activity, we're going to be using a moving average tool for the manager of the Dallas region, and he wants to analyze the fluctuation and the frequency of shrimp that is used at all 4 of the Dallas restaurants. And then he wants to determine the break-even point for the year. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is create a moving average. Now before we can create a moving average, we have to install the add-in, the analysis tool pack. All right, so I have it already installed, and it will appear on the data tab in the analyze group, and it's called data analysis. In 8B of this textbook of this chapter, we're going to be working with the solver. So next week we're going to be working with the solver. Now you probably don't have this installed, right? So in order to install this on your computer, you need to go to the File tab, down to Options, all the way down to the bottom. This opens up the Excel Options dialog box. From the left-hand side, you're going to see from the menu here, go ahead and select Add-ins. And then from the Manage Microsoft Add-ins, go all the way to the bottom where it says Manage. Make sure it says Excel Add-ins, and then select Go. Here is a list of different add-ins that you can install. We have installed the Analysis Tool Pack, so you just want to make sure there's a little check mark. You have a check mark in the box, right? You'll notice that I have one for the solver. We're going to be using this for 8B. So if you want to go ahead and install that now, you can. If not, we'll be installing it next week. Once you have them in there, they're permanently in there until you remove them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And because I already have them in there, nothing has changed, but you're going to see yours appear on the Data tab off to the right, added to the ribbon. All right, so we've made sure that our Analysis Tool Pack is enabled. And now we're going to create our moving average. So in order to do that, we're going to go and select Data Analysis. And from the dialog box that appears, if it's not already selected, go and select Moving Average. When we insert a moving average, we need to define a number of items. The first thing that we need to define is the input range. So let me move this out of the way. And we are defining that our input range is going to be A5 through AB5. Now we don't have any labels in the first row, so that doesn't apply, so we leave that unchecked. We're going to want to look at the sales at 4-week intervals, so I'm going to type in 4. And I would like my output to be to appear in row 6. All right, so I'm going to select A6 as my output range. I want to also make sure that I get a chart output of this, and I want to make sure that I have a check mark in there. All right, so that would determine whether or not I would have that visible. Once I have all the criteria entered, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And notice now that for row 6, this data has been calculated for us, and because we asked for a chart, we now have a chart down below. Now looking at this chart, it doesn't look very pretty, and we're going to fix that. All right, so that's the first thing that we're going to do. This is step number 3. We're going to position our chart between cells C8 and Z29. So I'm going to grab my chart from the outer edges, and I'm going to bring it up to and about C8 to the corners, and then I'm going to drag, let's bring this down. We're going to go down to Z29, so I need to make row 29 visible, and there is column Z, and you can either pull from the horizontal and vertical bars, or you can pull from a corner sizing bar. So either way works. All right, we want to make sure that the chart is slightly inside of the cell borders. And I'm going to go and minimize my screen so we can see a little bit better here. We can see more of what we have. Step number 4, we're going to edit our axis titles. So I'm going to double click on my vertical axis title, and I'm going to rename this Bags of Shrimp Used. And I'm going to select my horizontal axis, and I'm going to rename this 4-week period. And to get out of that title area, I just click in the white space of my chart. So that was step number 4. Step number 5, we want to display the days of the week as the category axis on our horizontal axis here. Right now we see arbitrary numbers, and it doesn't mean much. So we want this to be more meaningful to us. So I'm going to go ahead and select the category axis labels. I'm going to do a right click, and then I'm going to say select data. And what I want to do is I need to edit my horizontal axis label. So I'm going to say edit. Before I do, just notice how these are just arbitrary numbers, and we're going to change that. So I'm going to say edit, and I need to define where the data is coming from. All right, so I want this to be A4 through AB4. And then I'm going to say OK. And now notice that my labels are now reflected that correspond to the data that I have for the days of the week. Okay, next we're going to move on to plotting our forecast series, and we're going to move it to the secondary axis. So the forecast is the blue line. So I'm simply going to click on the blue line, actually double click on it, so that the format data appears. Now I want this to say format data series. So under series options, I'm going to identify the series that I want. So this should now read format data series. And I would like the plot series to be not on the primary axis, but on the secondary axis. And this changes the look of the chart. Next thing I'd like to do is, this is step number 7 now, we're going to format the chart area and the plot area with a solid fill, and they've identified the color that they would like us to use. So first I'm going to select my plot area. My colors are always located under the bucket. I want the fill area, so I'm going to close up the border and open up the fill. And I want a solid fill, and the color that they are asking for is in the 8th column and in the 2nd row. So it is this light green color. And I'm going to again select my chart area, so format my chart area. From the fill options, I want a solid fill. Because I've already used that color, it remembers it, so I don't need to go and find it. But I can just double check and see that I'm in the 8th row, in the 8th column, 2nd row. The last thing that I want to do before we move on is we want to format the cells in D6 through AB6. We want to put a comma cell style in here. So I'm going to go up to my cell styles and apply a comma, no decimals. Okay, so we are all done with our moving average, and that looks pretty good. Now we're going to move on to the projected income worksheet. I'm now on step number 8. In cell C3, we're going to construct a formula that takes the previous month's sales and multiplies it by 110%. All right, so we're going to begin first with an equal sign. We want last month's sales, and we're going to multiply this by 110%. All right, so we're going to take 1 plus our required sales growth, because 10% is our required sales growth. We want this, we're going to copy this formula. So because we're copying it, this B13 reference needs to be absolute. So I'm going to do a F4. We need to have an end bracket on our formula, and then we can go up to our formula bar and hit the enter key. Now remember, we want to copy this formula, so we're going to fill in for the following, for the year there. We also have, remember that we have different types of expenses. Remember, we have salaries and wages, some advertising, some rent. So these are our fixed expenses that we have. All right, so our total expenses, all right, there is a formula in here. It's our sum, and we're simply going to, we want to make sure that we copy that formula all the way over. And so we've identified our total expenses. And notice as we fill in this data that our gross profit and loss is determined. So we could see that it's in January that we are going to start making a profit. But we're going to show a chart. All right, so next we're going to create a line chart, and we're going to have a second series on that. So we need to select non-adjacent ranges. So I'm going to begin by selecting the ranges and then defining the chart that I would like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and select A2 to M3. I'm going to hold down my control key because remember I want non-adjacent ranges. And I'm going to select A9 through M9. And then I'll go up to the Insert tab in my chart group. I'm going to locate my line charts, and I'm going to select that first chart. Okay, so we've inserted a first line chart style. That was step number 9. Step number 10, we're going to go ahead and put a more meaningful chart title name on here. This is going to be called Expected Break-Even Point. All right, and that should be on one line. So I accidentally hit the Enter key. So the title of our worksheet is Expected Break-Even Point, and I'm going to click in the white space to deselect that. I want to position the chart between B15 and M36. So I'm going to close that out, and I'm going to drag this down to just inside the borders of B15, and I'm going to drag this over to column M, and I'm going to pull it down so that it's just inside row 36. And now we can actually visually see where our break-even point is going to be, right? So remember when I looked up at the top, I said to you that we can see we're in the hole here because that was identified by a negative number being in parentheses, all right? And it's not until January that we start seeing a profit based on our 10% sales growth. All right, so when we look at this chart, although we can see the break-even point, we can modify this chart so it's more obvious where that's actually going to happen, where it's going to be a more pronounced curve. All right, so step number 12, we're going to double click any of the values that we have on the vertical axis. So I'll go ahead and double click, and that's going to open up the Format Axis pane. And we want to, from our axis options, we want to modify the bounds, our minimum bounds, to be 150,000. Our maximum bounds are going to be 600,000. All right. And as soon as I click out of there, I'll see that change. Oh, no, not 600. I'm sorry, 500. We want that to be 500. 500,000, and our low point, our minimum is going to be 150, and our max is 500. Now, we see this gives us that more dramatic slope, right, than we had before. And again, it's becoming more visible at about in January, where we need about 315,000 in sales for our total expenses, for that to where the expenses are going to be at or about the same amount as our sales. Again, we're going to format the plot and chart area, so I'm going to select my chart. First, I'll select my plot area, go to my paint bucket here, my solid fill. The color that they would like us to use, I believe, is this color here. It's going to be the 5th column in the 2nd row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2nd row. And then again, select the chart, making sure the format chart area is selected. We're on the fill. We want that fill to be a solid fill. And again, because we used that previous color, the color before, it was previously used, it is still in that section there for us. Okay, so that is number 13. Now number 14, we're going to deselect the chart. Let's go ahead and select all the sheets. There's only 2 of them. And we'll go to our page setup dialog box. From here, we're going to insert a custom footer. All right, so again, we do this every week. This should not be new to us. We're going to put the file name field in the footer. We're going to center the pages horizontally. We are also going to change the orientation to landscape. We want to fit the width to 1, but the height is going to remain automatic. So we leave that as blank. Just leave it blank. And I think that's it. We're going to go ahead and say OK. And when we do that, notice up here the width goes to 1 page. Our height is automatic. And if we do a print preview, we'll see that as well. All right, so centered horizontally on the page. We see our footer. And everything, the width is set to fit on 1 page. All right, so everything looks good there. Last thing we want to do is put in some properties. So I'll go to my File tab. And under my Properties options, I'm going to put in some tags. My first tag is going to be Dallas. And my second tag is Seafood Inventory. Under the subject, go ahead and type in CISC 127, our course name and our section number. We will go on back. Also make sure that for the author that you see your name. All right, so they do ask for that, I believe, as well. And then we're going to make sure that we're in the correct order. We have moving average first, projected income second. I'm going to go ahead and save the file and then go ahead and submit this to the grader in Canvas. Okay, so that concludes the homework assignment for Excel Chapter 8. If you have any questions, please let me know. And remember, the Canvas inbox is the best way to reach me. Thank you.